what do you feel is wrong with the current educational systems around the world? And I'm going to ask Chris Duncan, Dr. Duncan, to have a first go at that. And we'll try and keep our answers to 4 minutes if we can. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, very much. Look, I just stress I'm in a hotel here in Canberra. The internet connection's a little unstable, so I hope it doesn't drop out. Look, I think I can be fairly brief about this. I mean, fundamentally, what I see is that students have become the object of learning rather than its subject, and that dynamic to me seems to be pretty widespread across many education systems. I think we've come to confuse and fundamentally misrepresent the purpose of education because we have mixed up outcomes of education and the means by which they're achieved. I can indicate here in Australia that we have a national assessment program which is conducted for all students in years 3, 5, 7 and 9. It occurs every year. And it has become the surrogate goal of Australian schooling. So I guess this is a key example of outcomes and the means by which they should be achieved becoming thoroughly confused. I think related to that, and one of the drivers of that, is that management theory, which is about individual and organisational performance, has fundamentally colonised education. This is what I would call the KPI syndrome, the key performance indicator. We now know that PISA is the KPI of national school systems, and that's fundamentally accepted. It's fundamentally, again, an economic idea about economic man and the importance of education to the economy. I have a view that KPI should be renamed as key performance inhibitor. And I think if we were to throw the KPIs out and think about some new ones, we would be, and particularly in policy narratives, we could do education a great service. As I said, it's the old problem. The KPI problem is this is the story of the man who loses his keys and he's looking under the streetlight for the keys. And somebody says, "Why are you looking there?" And he said, "I'm looking there because that's where the light is, but it's not where the keys are." And that's what I think we've come to do in education, is try to measure the things that are easy to look at. And testing, of course, is the obvious one. I mean, for example, you could measure in schools and do really interesting surveys around things like a concept like student cohesion, for example. You know, what's the level of student cohesion in the school? Which seems to me to be a fundamental concept of how students relate to one another and really sort of underlie those relationships which underlie their teaching and learning. I also think some of this phenomenon we're talking about, this is the KPI phenomena, the confusion of means with means with the outcomes of education. To go back to a bit of old style sort of cognitive psychology, which is petitioned very in constructs where cognition and emotion have been fundamentally petitioned and separated. And we now know there's been a revolution in educational neuroscience which says that feeling and emotion are absolutely the essence of thought. And until we start to get new policy narratives that really understands that key idea, I mean, it's fundamental. Terry's been talking about it for 20 years. Mary Helen Imodino Yang's been talking about it for a very long time. That fundamental idea that it is emotion and feeling that's the essence of thought, and they're not separate. They're intertwined and they're dynamic and so on. So that's what I see is the fundamental problem, is the colonisation of management theory into education. And we will obviously discuss a little bit later how we might wind back some of those dynamics. So that's probably not quite 4 minutes, Charles, but let's keep to the time. Thank you.
You're brilliant. Well done. Thanks very much, Chris. That's fantastic, and very powerful stuff. So let's. And I know there's lots of deep thinkers about values and about education here, I know. So I think that will resonate, hopefully, with a lot of them. Shagufa, the perspective from where you're sitting in India. Over to you.
Thank you, Charles. And yes, my views are largely based on my experiences in the global south, but perhaps they also resonate with many regions, what's going on in many regions in the global north as well. So I begin with a few anecdotes that offer glimpses into the reality of our education system today, at least in my experience in this region. The first one is the student on edge. So the teacher was walking down the school corridor and saw Meera, a bright, articulate 8-year-old, crumpled by her locker. She was having a panic attack. When her teacher comforted her, Meera kept repeating, I must get an A in the math quiz, else I won't get into the next grade and then I won't get into a good college. An 8-year-old is already internalizing a fear of failure tied to an outcome that's a decade away. Then we have a topper's dilemma. Alia is a student who always topped her class. And once after she graduated, she shared, I know how to get good marks, but I don't know what really makes me happy. Next is a child grappling with confusion. So Kiran is a bright boy from a tribal village in India. And he once shared, I failed not because I didn't know the answers, but because the questions didn't know me. His textbooks spoke of snowfall and malls, not of rivers, fields, and cattle that he lived beside. So his language, his world, and his way of knowing had no place in the classroom. And finally, the teacher on trial. At a college staff meeting, a teacher was told, your students must get better grades this year. The ranking of the college depends on it. That evening, as she sat preparing for her class, her thoughts drifted. She knew one student was struggling because the family had just moved from a village to the city, and another was juggling studies with part-time work. But the system appeared unconcerned with their lived realities. Together, these stories reflect the deep crisis in education today, where the focus is on information, not meaning, performance pressure rather than understanding, and disconnection and inequity. So something clearly is amiss. First, education is too focused on results and outcome, as was just said, rather than relationships. It focuses more on information rather than wisdom. And in the race for information acquisition, we often disregard understanding. We forget that education is not only about producing skilled workers, but also nurturing our natural human inclination to be curious, empathetic, and compassionate. Second, education today has grown increasingly detached from real life. So students or learners are seldom guided to relate what they study to their lived experiences, their communities, surroundings, or even the choices that they need to make every day. So the gap between knowledge and life is growing dangerously wide. Third, the system often neglects teachers themselves. In many parts of the world, I'm aware that teachers work under immense pressure, both school and college teachers, with little support or recognition. So gradually what happens is that this chips away inspiration, and without inspired teachers, there can be no transformative learning. And finally, fourth and perhaps most important is that education has lost its humane compass. You know, today we have, at least in India and in the global south, and I think elsewhere in the world as well, a proliferation of educational institutions, more digital tools than ever before. And yet, across the world, students seem to be stressed. They appear to be rather disengaged with their own self as well as with others. Teachers themselves are exhausted and inequalities are widening, all of which act as barriers to optimizing human potential. So, although education illuminates by way of information, and there's no doubt of that, unfortunately, it does not radiate the warmth that is needed to nurture life. So we are creating a tragic gap. Highly skilled individuals who are ethically fragile. Individuals who are brilliant achievers and competitors, but often poor collaborators. Students who solve complex equations, but remain unsure about how to resolve conflicts through ethical choices. Students who project confident and upbeat outer selves, but their inner selves are often in disarray. So have we ever wondered what kind of person our education is enabling us to become? Are we mentoring students to learn how to treat others kindly, how to make choices that are right, not just easy, and how to live well? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shagufa. That's again very powerful testimony, really, about the failings, as certainly as all of us tend to see it in what's going on in education around the world. David, over to you, David Rouse, from the perspective of where you are in the UK and your experience and deep knowledge of the educational systems here.
Indeed, thanks for that, Charles. I'd like to question, what is the purpose and function of education? I don't think we think sufficiently about this. Is it to teach people, children, young people and adults, or is it to teach subjects like language, mathematics, science, technology, and so on? Is it to meet the identified needs of each young person in order to enable them to develop and flourish as human beings with an emphasis on being a human being? Or is it to prepare them as a citizen within a social structure, such as a social contract, for example, with its related Kantian duties, responsibilities, and obligations? The difficulty is that the purpose appears to be frequently identified by governments as being almost exclusively the latter, with a further emphasis on good citizenship and the acceptance of the current norms, laws, rules, morals and values that should be accepted and practiced by the whole community. For example, British values, British values underpin what it is to be a citizen in the modern and diverse Britain. They allegedly allow us to create environments free from discrimination, intolerance and hate. They help us to challenge prejudice and stereotyping while strengthening relationships within the community through values that incorporate, and these are the British values: democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, mutual respect for and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs, and for those without any faith at all. And in schools, these are required by law to be promoted, the fundamental British values. So they are pretty powerful stuff and are included within the overall curriculum, very much so. But what happens when a significant number of individuals are unprepared to recognise or accept such national values and decide to support other values that may come into conflict with the accepted norms of society, which has happened and is happening in the UK? We have enormous amount of tension at the moment between people and what their belief structure might be, what their religion might be, their culture and so on. And it's leading to real social fragmentation. Does such conflict result in the confusion and argument about national values and the systems that they support, including education, of course? Because this can result in general national state of disharmony and lack of proportion and sensitivity, lack of clarity and intelligibility, confusion about goodness, what is goodness and purity, and a lack of unity and diversity, leading to social and national global conflict, hate, division, and possible war. And there seems to be a lot of that about at the moment. What I read in the newspapers is very clear that there's a lot of conflict and hate and disaffection at an international level. So the world appears to be experiencing such conditions in many geographical areas at the moment, including the UK, and education and national systems of education appear to be powerless to redress this highly significant imbalance, perhaps in part by not addressing the needs of both individual flourishing, which of course is essential, while in an ethos or climate of stability and peace, which young people need, where the required values of the nation state and the individual developmental and maturation needs of the citizens are met within a framework that encourages harmony, cohesion, and cooperation. And that is accepted at a local and regional, national, and maybe global dimension. This is what we need. But is it possible, and how might it be achieved? It's a big question.
Thank you, David. That's very powerful and gives rise to, I suspect, lots of questions, lots of discussion potentially. Terry, can I just hand over to you and ask you the same question? What's wrong with education these days?
Well, how long have we got? Lots. But and I endorse everything my colleagues have said, but if I can just focus on one thing that clearly comes from any amount of research, it's the lack of emphasis on what Fred Newman from Wisconsin in his research on authentic pedagogies described as the, quote, ambience of care and trust. In his work, there were 5, and it was extensive work, 5 what he called pedagogical dynamics, 5 essential elements that defined successful teaching and schooling. And the ambience of care and trust was really the sine qua non, without which forget the rest. In other words, a school could have a lot of the things that are emphasised and resourced, the most highly qualified staff, the best physical resources, the most up-to-date technology, systems that support it might have the most robust policies, aims, goals, directives, documentation, etc., etc. But if students at the coalface don't feel cared for, safe and secure, and trusting of their teachers and school executive, then something will go wrong. That became so clear from his vast work across USA schools. The same message came through in an Australian Council of Research study into excess of 300,000 students about what mattered most to them about their teachers. When factor analysed, number 1 was that their teachers cared about them. Number 2, that they trusted their teachers. Number 3 was that their teachers made the teaching interesting. And number 4, that their teachers were organised. The things that systems, including teacher education, tend to prioritise were actually 3 and 4, according to the kids, whereas 1 and 2 tend to get very little mention from systems. The message is that teaching's about relationships first and foremost. And whether we look at the ancient wisdom of Pythagoras, who said it's sheer stupidity to expect that a pupil faced with unkindness could ever achieve well, or the medieval wisdom of the Muslim scholar Hazali, who said that the number 1 requirement for any teacher is being kind to the pupil, establishing a relationship of trust and care. Or if we look at modern educational neuroscience that tends to confirm these ancient wisdoms, showing so clearly the importance of having the brain in the right emotional space, safe, secure and caring space, if any effective learning's to happen. The message is the same. Yet what do we get from education systems pretty much worldwide? Talk of performance, outcomes, testing and measuring, standardise this, standardise that. No, education is first and foremost about relationships, positive relationships. Any human endeavour is about relationships. And that's not rocket science, but it sure as hell is human science. And as Fred Newman's work showed so clearly, if we get that wrong, if we deprioritise that imperative, if we drown out that obvious starting point with pressure on teachers and kids to be performing, achieving certain outcomes, being tested and measured within an inch of their lives, most especially when it's happening at the early childhood level, the first experience that kids have of schooling, then something will go wrong. And it has. Stats on student disengagement, including school bullying, are worse than ever across so many places. Teacher burnout and attrition, worse than ever. You name it, we have a problem.
Very powerful. I mean, that is, I have to say, each one of you, you know, we could have gone on for half an hour, as you say, Terry, how long we got. But thank you so much. The fact that comes out of all of those, and I'm not going to try and summarize all your short speeches, but it's really, we're missing the human element, that element of care and trust, as Terry was saying, we're concentrating on whether it's the KPIs, the testing, the measurement, the performance, achievement, and the pressure of producing academic results. All of these things mitigate in many ways. They're not all bad things, but they are overwhelmingly dominating the educational landscape to the exclusion of these other arguably more important factors. So we're going to move on to the next question, and we'll just try and keep it fairly brief, if that's okay, everyone. A bit less time than the first round, just to allow time for everyone else to have their say. But given what you think about the educational systems at the moment, wherever you are or globally, what is your vision for addressing that? What is your vision for better education? And you know, if you can say it in few words, how do we move towards achieving that vision? And I'm going to start off with Shagufa. Shagufa, can you have a go at that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you, Charles. Yeah, so you know, let me start by inviting you to reflect on a question that may linger beyond this moment into the days ahead. So if any one of us could select 3 non-negotiable character traits for a child or for a leader of tomorrow, what would they be? So let's take a moment, think about our answers. We don't have to share it right now, but I'm certain that the top 3 reflect some of the aspects that were just mentioned by the other speakers, you know, reflect wisdom rather than mere information, that we tend to choose enduring virtues over ephemeral facts. And so, in a way, this reveals our shared deepest aspiration that our children and our future leaders must be first and foremost good human beings. Already, I think David mentioned about, you know, do we want to create human beings or human doings or both? I think that's a vital question. And I would like to refer to 2 interrelated concepts from Indic knowledge systems to further illustrate this point a little more. So ancient Indian thinkers spoke of 2 kinds of knowledge. One, which is known as avidya, and another is vidya. So avidya is the knowledge of the external, how to earn, build, achieve. It relates to possession, status, performance. It makes us see ourselves as doers pursuing outcomes. On the other hand, vidya is the knowledge of the internal, how to live, love, understand ourselves. It helps us to realize that our worth lies not only in what we do, but in who we are. Today, as was also mentioned by the other speakers, our systems appear to be overflowing with avidya, so lots of information, skills, endless doing. But what we lack is vidya, the wisdom to understand the self and reality and to just be. Real education must hold both in harmony, equipping us with the skills to act and the awareness to act with wisdom. Only then can we nurture human beings and not merely human doings. Pedagogy was mentioned a while ago, and if we are to instill Vidya, then we need to really take a look at the pedagogy, interweave, reflective dialogical methods, and also real-world learning, so community-based research projects, with the idea that this would lead to spiraling awareness and hopefully transformation of oneself and of one's understanding of the other. And I think Dr. Terence already mentioned that most of all, we need to create a care-based relational pedagogy that is practiced in a safe and non-judgmental environment. The educator, many of us here perhaps have been or are educators. So the educator or the teacher or the guru, as we call in the Indic system, is not just a teacher who imparts information, but a guide for transformation. So actually, it's the teacher or the educator or the guru who leads the student from avidya to vidya. And the question in this context is, to what extent, if at all, our teacher education programs are focusing on teachers' inner awareness? Do we offer safe spaces for teachers to acknowledge, share, reflect upon their own values and how these influence teaching practices? So really, I think what we need is to reimagine education that synchronizes, as has been said earlier, head, heart, and hand. So let's imagine, what if every child left school not only knowing grammar, algebra, prose, and poetry, but also how to listen deeply, the value of silence, how to stay calm when things fall apart. A child who is sensitive to the lived realities of others, and most of all, knows how to live with care for self, others, and the world. So if we can shift the question from how much do you know or what do you know to who are you becoming, I think we can begin to heal our systems and perhaps our societies and our world. I think I've overshot the time, Charles. So about GAVE, I will just keep
vision.
that for.
A wonderful
so I
vision.
think I'll. Yeah.
Okay.
I have one more minute. Okay, so I just a word about GAVE. Where does GAVE fit in all this? So GAVE is committed to create an ecosystem that will integrate the doing and being, and it's well poised to help deliver a rejuvenated education system by reaching out and working with multiple dimensions of the ecosystem. So, for example, teacher empowerment and training with a difference. Based on research, so evidence-based advocacy for policymakers, especially, to enable them to see that values-based education is an investment in human well-being and peace. And finally, I would like to quote Gandhi, who said, "In a gentle way, we can shake the world." So we at GAVE hope to do this one step at a time, and we invite you all to participate in this shared journey. Thank you.
Speaking the world, isn't that wonderful? Thank you, Shagufa. That's inspiring. David, over to you. What's your vision for the future?
Well, my vision for the future is to encourage schools to see themselves as learning communities in which a number of people come together for a particular purpose. And that purpose is to help young people to develop into mature, responsible, and conscious people of the world around them, conscious of themselves, conscious of other people within that structure, so that it's not a world of me, 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 and me, but rather a world of you and me leading to us, a community. And to that end, I think that it's very important that the ethos, the structure of the spirit of the school should be carefully considered. You already mentioned a great many items, issues which need to be looked at within a school about what the needs might be. But I think that a community, and I worked for a period with Larry Kohlberg, community meetings, not just the meetings of staff, but the meetings of the whole school, including cleaning staff, cooks and so on, come together periodically with parents invited to see what is it that we really are trying to achieve. Because I think sometimes we just lose the plot and we start looking at other things or get sidetracked by misbehavior, by the fact that the boys haven't got ties on and the girls aren't wearing their skirts properly, and so on and so forth. And we lose sight of the fact that it's about people and enabling people, not only in terms of their own personality and development, but also knowledge of the world, so that they're aware of what reality might be and can construct it for themselves. I think that is incredibly important. The spirit of how we come together and unify as a group with a purpose, and we identify that purpose so that it's absolutely clear. We all agree, if it makes sense, that that is what it's all about, and that then is our aim and goal to do that. Now, what the purpose is, of course, is incredibly important, and we've discussed that, haven't we? Mainly, it's about people, humanity. Mainly, it's about enabling them to fit into the world in a way which is constructive, positive, helpful, cooperative, and so on. And you don't do that within a structure where the ethos is, I'm telling you, punishment, criticism, put downs, etc., 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 and which create divisions between staff, pupils, parents, workers in the school, and so on and so forth. And my experience over the last, 6, maybe 10, 15 years is that there are more divisions being created than there are enabling circumstances which encourage cooperation, coming together and working for that common goal, which is for the benefit of humanity and the world.
I think that's a good place to stop, Dave, if I can stop you there, because that ends exactly where I think many of us would like to end. But we're not ending. We're going on to Chris. Chris, your vision for the future in a nutshell.
Yeah, look, a little differently.
Chris, I think we are having a problem hearing you, so I'm going to move on to Terry, and let's just try later to see if we can get you back. But you might need to rejoin. I think you've frozen. Terry, your vision for the future of education.
Thanks, Charles. I guess my vision comes largely from my experience of values education, or what I increasingly call values pedagogy, because we came to see this approach as a holistic pedagogy that sort of does the whole job for a school. In the Australian values education program that effectively upended the traditional approach to teaching and schooling while it was happening, I think we took the wisdom of Pythagoras and Hazali and updated neuroscience seriously, in that relationships were prioritised, the relationships between teacher and student, student and student, school principal, staff and students, etc. Even the relationships between the school and parents and the wider community. How do we do it? Firstly, through values talk. The language is important. Talking about the importance of respect, trust, care, responsibility, acceptance of difference, forgiveness, etc., etc. The language of values became part of school discourse, be it from the signage on the street front, we value respect, responsibility, etc., to the language the school principal would use in assembly, to the language used in behaviour management, the whole way of dealing with behaviour management and bullying and all of those things, all the way through to the way curriculum content would be unpicked in classroom learning, effectively focusing on the value and relevance of whatever the content was, along with the values embedded in that particular content, be it a theme in English literature, an event in history, a discovery in science, whatever, focusing on the value component rather than merely the surface measurables, which is so often the focus when performance, outcomes, etc., are seen as what matters most. And what did we find through this approach to teaching and schooling? 3 things when factor analysed. 1, classrooms became calmer places, safer, more secure places, according to the students themselves, places that resemble Fred Newman's ambience of care and trust. 2, schools became happier places, surprise, surprise. Teachers and students, often supported by evidence from parents and the wider community, reported higher levels of well-being, social and emotional. There was hard evidence for this, showed in things like reduction of teacher and student absenteeism. Everyone was happier to be in this kind of place. Again, I say, surprise, surprise. And 3, and it was the one that surprised us at first, we called it the surprise effect. Academic learning improved without anything else happening. And we were able to test this in the evaluation study when we compared the evidence we had with studies that focused specifically on academic achievement. The most common artifacts of student achievement in the literature were realised when positive relationships and the well-being factors that accompany them were prioritised. In a word, results from going about the business of teaching and schooling through what we called a values pedagogy endorsed that ancient wisdom about what matters most in education, as well as the latest findings from educational neuroscience. Get the relationships right and you're on the money. Drown out that priority with the instrumentalist noise of performance, outcomes, testing, standardise this and that, and you'll have a problem you'll battle to fix easily.
Thank you, Terry, so much. I mean, I think the message is loud and clear, isn't it? And supported by that amazing evidence from the Australian Values Education Initiative, which sadly and rather, if I may say so, rather insanely was terminated by the new Australian government coming in 2009, was it 2009, 2010? Chris, you've got a bit stop. I don't know if your video is okay now. Can you speak now? Give it a go. It looks like he's frozen again. So we've lost Chris. But I think what would be good to do, we've got a little bit of it, we've got 10 minutes left, which is less than anticipated. It's hard to keep the timing with so many interesting speakers saying so many interesting things. But it would be good to throw this open, really. And maybe what we'll do is we'll just stop this, put the spotlights off of the panel so that we can all see each other. And while I'm doing that, maybe I can just ask, well, thank the panel again, because that was absolutely fascinating. And ask, maybe I can just ask Jackie Lefevre, Dr. Jackie Lefevre, who's just added something to the chat. And I think, Jackie, you might like to just say what that is, because I think it'd be interesting to get reactions from my colleagues on that. So, Jackie, over to you while I just spotlight everyone.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks. That's very kind. And first of all, thank you, panel. Fascinating. Agree with everything. Absolutely. You should be in charge. Please come run the planet. That would be awesome. My interest is values. I work on the kind of conscious connection to values and well-being kind of space. But a colleague of mine, Julia Reid, has relatively recently completed her doctoral research at Melbourne Graduate School. She's a teacher educator, so she's very deeply into pedagogy and all of that. And her PhD looked at what happens with trainee teachers if we support them to connect to their personal values and then think about how those values influence the kind of teacher they want to be. And given how that influences the kind of teacher that they want to be, where might they best do their teaching practice? What kind of a school is a place where they can thrive and through their own thriving support their students to thrive? So yes, she did a phenomenal piece of work, and it won't surprise you to know that the conclusion is, do you know what? Yes, if we enable new teachers to totally be themselves and be confident in that when they go into the classroom to relate to others, the outcomes are great. So I have just put the information about accessing her dissertation into the chat for anybody who is interested.
And I think you were being asked, Jackie, thanks for that. You were being asked whether that's based on the Schwartz values model or...
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't use Schwartz. It draws on a different values framework, Monescence values framework, which itself is rooted in the Hall Toner inventory of human values. And that framework, which I know the Hall Toner is used has been used in the past within education studies. So it's based on that one.
Okay, fantastic. Terry, had you, this is a just published piece of graduate research, so you probably aren't aware of it yet, but it sounds as though it basically supports a lot of what's being said today, especially about the importance of bringing teachers into this focus. It's not all about students, it's about teachers as well, and teachers being aware of values and the role of values in their pedagogy.
Yeah, if I can just say something very, very quickly, I think teacher education is the other frontier that we haven't really gotten around to. Teacher education everywhere tends to be a little reactive to what's happening rather than proactive. As I say, it's a new frontier. It needs to be much bolder. We should always be putting out teachers with new ideas who are kind of shake things up a bit rather than those that just fit in too easily. But that's another big story.
Anyone else got any comments on what they've heard? Any thoughts, any questions, any suggestions? Yeah, Hangren. Is that Hangren? If I'm sorry, I'm mangling your name, but you raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Everyone, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yep.
Very clearly.
Thank you. Oh, the panelists are fantastic. Thank you for your sharings. My name's Ha. Just call me Ha from Vietnam, Living Value Education Vietnam. Where with the short time we have now, so I just have a question. We want everything in your visions that you share, and we want students become good human being besides doing. But how can we do that in reality? The parents and the students, you ask, what help them in life, really, with the value? Can they become successful in life, both with finance, relationships, health, and inner being? So if the values are what we want to change, can do it and prove the effectiveness. Just a tolerant from my English. Thank you. So, and then I think everyone will agree to do that.
Okay.
From my experience to work many years, not very many compared to all of you here, of the education, living value education in Vietnam. I work not only with teachers and students, but also with doctors, business people with the values. And what I do is to show them what are the benefits in life, both material and non-material things. In that case, we can easily move on without much effort. And the second thing, based on that, I think the first reaction of my interest for this panel is that the question, what's wrong with the education right now? If, from my point of view, can we just think about or put the question of what already good with the education system right now and what we can do to make it better? From that standpoint, I think it will be easily for us to to go ahead and with the help of people to work together. So I think
yes,
that's it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I
Thank you.
think we're not trying to characterize the educational systems everywhere in the world as totally, totally bad. Of course not. There's lots of good things going on and lots
Yeah.
of wonderful initiatives.
Charles, I couldn't find where to put my hand up, so can I just I'll just do it physically. My name's Trish Collins. I'm kind of very new to this community because and I have heard of Terence before because he's in Australia, but all of my research is actually based on Schwartz's values, but I actually currently have a master's student looking into the values in the Australian curriculum, general capabilities and Alice Springs statement, and want to sort of to see if Schwartz's values are actually mirrored in there. But I'm thinking that this community is more aligned with moral values rather than personal values. Is that the impression I get?
Would like to answer that. Terry?
Can I have a go at that? Trish, I would say, from my point of view anyway, pedagogical values. I'm a curriculum person. That's where I came into teacher education. I'm always looking for what works. And so what I found in taking the approach that I've talked about was this works. I think I referred to the ACR study, Ken Rowe's ACR study 20 years ago. You know, what are the kids saying matters? Teacher cares. Trust the teacher. The teacher trusts us. 3 and 4 were the chestnuts, the things that we focus on. I think we've got the pedagogy wrong. I think we've got the pedagogical values wrong. Well, we should be looking for what works. And there's an ancient wisdom and there's the most updated neuroscientific wisdom that what works depends on how the relationships is established. As with anything, as with a personal relationship, a business relationship, that's the bit that somehow or other we miss. It's so obvious, I think, that we miss it.
I totally agree with that, Terence, because I'm in early childhood, so everything in early childhood focuses on relationships. So
absolutely.
I guess that's and that's how I got into this, because the relationships were quite mismatched, and I wondered if it was about the values that the children already hold. So
and if I can just, I know a preschool where the first question is, let's remember we've got to start preparing these kids for NAPLAN in a few years' time. This basic skills. That's where it all goes wrong.
Correct.
Rich, thank you for that. This is a long,
Charles, could I just very briefly interrupt there, rudely perhaps, but excuse me. I think that it's very important because when people use a word like moral and ethics, they immediately associate it with religion. I don't think there necessarily has to be a connection at all. There is if people want it, but really we're talking about human values, and human values include things like being kind to people, being truthful to other people, generally speaking, and so on and so forth. So they are morally orientated, but they're not necessarily religiously grounded, if you understand.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree.
So look, there's so many things we can talk about, and actually, just to maybe we'll take one more question, just in case people start moving away because we reached our time. Anne-Marie, can you just hold on a second? I'm just going to say, in case we start losing people, that this is to discuss these questions, to think about practical solutions. That's really why GAVE has come into existence. We haven't touched on that much here, although you're all aware that it's why we're holding this event. It's a sort of, a chance to have a glimpse of the sort of thinking behind the setting up of GAVE. But we aim to address all these questions really as over the coming months and years, and that's our mission really. And there's there's lots of different viewpoints involving the people involved in GAVE. We're coming at it from somewhat different backgrounds and angles, academic and practical. But there's room for all of those viewpoints, really, because what we find is that in the end we're really attracted to the same sort of solutions, and we're looking, as Ha said, we're looking at actually what works as well in the world and looking at how we can replicate that, how we can advise governments. All of those things, I think, will come into the discussion. But if you can join us, it would be great. I've put we have our launch event on the 6th of November. We're doing one earlier and one later. So the earlier one to suit anyone from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Vietnam, sort of westward up to Europe time zones, including India, of course. And then the other to suit some of those time zones plus the Americas. So on the 6th, we're doing one early, one late session, almost the same times as these ones, adjusting for time changes and whatever. And we'd love you all to come along. I've put the registration link in the chat. So do come and join us there. Anne-Marie, over to you. You want to raise?
I don't know if I'm taking your time because you've given a lovely sum up. But I just wanted to pick up on something. This has been fantastic, Charles. The launch of this is so inspiring because higher education right now is in a state of turmoil. And this meeting is ahead of that turmoil. And that's where we need to be. A guiding light, not afraid to speak out, not afraid to innovate in the space. So thank you for that, because I'm in the sector every day, as are some of the colleagues on this call. And a lot of it is quite negative, and it's based around finance and sustainability. And I don't mean ecological sustainability, I mean financial. So the future of education is going to lie in the hands of everybody who can innovate to try and fix. And the other point I just want to make is, David, you make a very good point when you say ethics and values and morals are not the remit of religion. I did my doctorate on that 20 years ago, and it was funded by an Irish government scholarship. And it was all about, does faith make a difference to how we do our morality? And I'm still wondering about that specific question. But at that time, what I argued was that the story itself is really important. People bring their own story and background into the search for truth and values. But that doesn't ever mean it can't be shared with other people, because it would be sectarian if it wasn't, and if it wasn't able to be discussed both within people's traditions and outside into the wider world. And I think we've got to keep that discourse of sharing expertise together, because it's in the muddle and the confusion of who understands what and who doesn't that we can often get entrenched unnecessarily. So this meeting has been so refreshing. And my final point, Charles, if you will permit me, is I've been reading Eckhart Tolle's latest book, which is now a bestseller overnight, The Power of Now. And we heard earlier from Professor Shagufa about presence. And I really feel everybody needs to embrace that a bit more, that in the midst of confusion and the search for where are the values to lead our education system right now, we need to be present to ourselves to bring out the creativity that is there within everybody to find solutions, but also the presence to listen to other people, which I've spent a beautiful hour this morning. Thank you, Charles, and everybody doing that, so that we can actually be present to each other and hear different perspectives in a world that's full of mixed priorities. So thank you to everybody. And Charles, I hope that that's helpful, and wish everybody the best of luck in this. It's needed, and it's wonderful this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It's lovely to see you, and we hope that you'll join us at the launch and hopefully in the ongoing operations of GAVE, because I know you can contribute a lot from your perspective. Anyone else want to just have a word before we have to wrap up, sadly? We have people here from all over the world. I know Brian Vanderland in the Philippines, others from, as we know, half from Vietnam, others from, we're not quite sure where, some of you, but you encompass large parts of the world. And we do want to be very much a global movement. That's absolutely important because there's so many fascinating things going on in values education in different parts of the world, which, you know, it's hard to track down. You know, you've really got to scrutinize the fine print of the academic literature to find exciting things going on in all sorts of countries, which we don't know about. So to respond to Ha's point about not being too negative about what's going on currently, there's lots of good things that we can build on, which is good. And a lot of you are doing that work too. The various organizations like Living Values, my own organization, Human Values Foundation, what Minal does in India, what a lot of others of you doing both in education and the broader value space as well. There's lots of relevant stuff going on. And Jackie, I know you're one of the people I turn to for updates on the unfolding, huge amount of research going on in the value space. There's such a lot going on. It's an exciting area, and we need to sort of have a spotlight for what's going on in the values education space, because there's a lot going on there too. And a lot of it's relevant. We're not restricting ourselves to education in terms of primary, elementary education, secondary education, tertiary. It's education for life too that we're interested in. So we look upon education in the Global Alliance for Values education there being through life, very, very broadly defined. So we welcome all of you and look forward to seeing hopefully some of you at the session on the 6th of November. And thank you all very much. My thanks again to the speakers. I haven't even tried to summarize what you've been saying, but there will be video posted on this, and you can catch up with it on that. It'll be on YouTube once we've had a chance to. We've got the World Values Day is coming up tomorrow, which is going to produce a huge amount of materials as well. So it may take a bit of time to process it, but hopefully in the next, sometime the next week, it'll be up. And do contact us. There's contact details on the Eventbrite entry, hopefully. If not, contact me on LinkedIn or any of my colleagues here, speaking as part of GAID, my colleagues here as well, if you prefer, if they're where you are. So thank you very much again. And do join us if you want later on today, but we're having another session. Otherwise, I hope to see you on the 6th of November for our public launch. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.